Dear brothers and sisters, good morning. It is fantastic to be able to share some thoughts with you this morning. I know Uncle Brian is busy this weekend, and I was just elated when he asked me to do a lesson for you guys this morning. I trust you are well. We send you all of God's speed and peace here from the States. My family is doing well, and we are very blessed. I want to speak to you this morning about your spiritual life and compare it to a garden. I don't like saying this, but God is a gardener. He's an expert gardener. The Bible starts with the garden, right? The Garden of Eden. And it really ends with the garden as we come to the end of the world and we walk with God, and the tree of life is there again, and there's rivers flowing. And so it seems like God likes gardening. I don't like that. I don't like saying that because you will understand this morning I despise gardening. Anyways, Paul's theology also is often filled with symbolism related to gardening. He would say things like, you reap what you sow. He would say things like, some plant, others water, and God makes things grow. And when he tries to describe Christian virtues, he would call it the fruit of the Spirit, right? And Jesus seems to be a master gardener as well. He tends to a vineyard, which is the church, where he cuts off branches that don't produce fruit, and he prunes those who do produce fruit so they can produce better fruit. He uses the concept of gardening in various parables, the parable of the sower, the parable of the wheat and the weeds, the parable of the mustard seed, etc., etc. So anyways, this has been playing on my mind, and one of the things that we've really been struggling with in America is just how expensive things are. The other day I went to go buy a tomato. Okay, it was quite a monster, not too bad, but about this size, and it cost me $2. So if you want to convert that, that's about 38 rand. Now people say, no, you shouldn't be converting. I do, because if I don't, I'm going to spend all of my money on nothing, and my mind cannot comprehend that in South Africa maybe I can buy a tomato for 5 rand. Yeah, I've got to pay 40 rand for it. So I was annoyed with this. I said, no. I'm going to plant a garden. And I'm going to grow my own tomatoes. And I'm going to grow my own potatoes. Because this is crazy. I'm not going to buy into this American system that's so expensive. Do you sense the rebellion here? Anyway, so we had a guy in the church that had just a piece of land with a fence around. And he said, well, you can come put your garden in here. It's nice. The fence keeps the deer out. And he even went, he's a great guy. He went tilling the soil for me, make it nice and soft. I had another brother here in the church who's a big farmer. And he said, hey, I'll bring you some manure. I'll bring you some chicken poop. So he brought me some chicken manure, and we worked that into the soil. In actual fact, I didn't. The brother whose land it is, he did that. What a wonderful guy. And then later on, me and my family, we went to Bymart town. Bymart, it's a shop here in town, and we went to go buy some seeds, corn, carrots, beets, green beans, onions. I had to throw in a few watermelon seeds there as well. Cucumber, did I say tomato? Yes, all of that. We loaded up that field with seeds. We're gonna eat this year, and we're gonna eat for free. God's gonna provide for us. The brother whose land it is, he graciously provided a sprinkler. And I'm so sorry, guys. I wanted to show you these images. I want to show you what the garden looks like. But for the life of me, the last time I did a video like this was like 4 years ago. And for the life of me, I cannot remember which programs I used or where to even get them to include photos into the video. So I apologize about that. You're going to have to use your imagination. Anyways, the soil was good. The sun was pumping, and there was loads of water. And I knew the principle that Paul spoke about. He says, God makes things grow. I can't even make myself grow. I can't make a plant grow. You plant, and then you leave it to God. Let God do his garden. So we left the garden at peace for God, because he said that he makes things grow. So we leave the garden for him to let it grow. And we were excited about that because we're going to see the miracle that God does. Anyways, we got busy with summer. And after a few weeks, I realized that I probably need to go check up on this garden, and which I did. Now, before I went to the garden, I had in my mind neat rows of tomato plants. I had, nice, that's how I planted them, right? I planted them to be neat rows and to be neat and nicely spaced, and there to be no other things growing. I think you know where this is going. I wanted it to be neat, and I wanted some big pumpkins and stuff, and I wanted to see like 50 watermelon lying there, and I'm just going to arrive. So you plant, you arrive, you take your fruit and you go enjoy it. That's what I expect. God makes things grow, isn't it? Even the day before, we went to go visit some other people. They had a wonderful garden. I mean, the corn was high. They had a pumpkin this size. They've got some other things here. I don't even, it looks like a cucumber on steroids or something, but it's this big thing. Well, what do they call it? I can't remember. This is a weird name. I'm still adapting to life here. Anyways, so these are the expectations that I had. And when I arrived at my garden, lo and behold, ladies and gentlemen, it was growing like nobody's business. Once again, the scriptures are true. God makes things grow. There were plants growing everywhere. In actual fact, there were some plants growing in my garden that I didn't even plant. They were there. I don't know how they got there. God's amazing. He lets other stuff grow in your garden as well that you didn't even plant. Indeed, He makes plants grow while you are sleeping. And you know what the other plants were, right? Weeds. I had a garden full of weeds. And it reminded me of what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 13, verse 24 to 28. I'll read it to you. Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and then went away. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, then the weeds also appeared. The owner's servant came to him and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where then did the weeds come from?" "An enemy did this," he replied. The servants asked him, "Do you want us to go and pull them up?" I was thinking immediately about that when I arrived at my garden. I see all the weeds growing in my garden. I planted good seed, and seems like someone else came and planted bad seed. Now I'm thinking, who was it? Who was this? Was it my poop provider? Was it the chicken manure guy? What did these chickens eat to produce those plants? Or was it Doug, whose land this is? Did he go sow some? And you've been gardening for a while. I don't even know where it comes from. Where do the weed seeds come from? Do weeds just grow from nowhere? And this principle made so much sense to me. And so, what's the logical thinking here? I need to go pull out those weeds. So I went down to Dollar Tree over here. It's a pretty cool shop. You can buy everything for $1.25. They call it Dollar Tree. I don't know why, but $1.25 you can buy anything. Go get a pair of gloves, gardening gloves. I'm gonna rip some weeds out. And I went into that field. The sun was baking on my head, and it was difficult dealing with those weeds. But as I was working on this, there's so many spiritual principles that came to my mind, and I thought I'm gonna pull it together in a lesson for you. So here's some gardening thoughts that I had wrestling with the fruit of the soil that I did not plant for you this morning. So here's a bunch of lessons. The first lesson is this, and I say this with tongue in cheek. Some plants are demon possessed. That's when I was standing there in the field and I'm trying to figure out, like, I'm going to pull out these weeds and I'm busy doing it. I literally, it felt like there were some of those weeds that were demon possessed. Now there's a plant here in the Pacific Northwest. Ladies and gentlemen, the Garden of Eden must have been here. Remember when God said to, he cursed the ground and said it's going to produce thorns and thistles? I think it started here. Thorns and thistles. South Africa's got nothing. Here they've got a thing called the blackberry bush. You just look at it, it looks demon possessed. It's the most crazy thing. It's full of thorns. You think a rose bush is bad. You haven't seen this bad boy. This bad boy sticks in you, scratches you, cuts you. It doesn't matter if you've got gloves, you can't get rid of it. It is one of the most annoying things. And there were a few blackberry bushes that had infiltrated through the fence into my garden. I was very annoyed with this. I wanted to talk to Doug about this because his fence was not weed proof, blackberry bush proof. These things, they hold onto you, walk past it, they scratch through your pants. I mean, you got to wear 3 pairs of jeans if you go hunting. I hate hunting here because of blackberry bushes. They grow faster than whatever it is that you planted, and they make it very difficult for you to clear your garden, right? So I tried to break that. You can't even touch it. The thorns just it penetrates your hands. I couldn't break it. I couldn't pull it out. I needed something stronger than me to destroy the blackberry bush. Something powerful that could dominate it and could destroy it, that could cut it off, could dig it out. So I looked around. I didn't bring the appropriate weapons, but I did find like a steel rake, and I started beating it. That didn't work. That thing is stronger than a steel rake. And then I went looking for a spade. I eventually found a spade, and I chopped that thing. I beat it and I chopped it. You can understand why I would use the words demon possessed, because that's what it feels like. Now listen carefully. There are some strongholds in our lives, things, habits, thoughts, or individuals. Let's call it the 3 P's: pursuits, people, perspectives, that are birthed in and maintained by the powers and the teachings of demons. It's real. They are not from God. They are from darkness, and they are irritating your spiritual success. That could be some type of an addiction. It could be the stubbornness of your own heart. It could be the love for money. And it could be a person in your life that is a bad influence. And that person is not interested in God at all. And that person is irritating your spiritual life. And you cannot remove it yourself. It's too powerful. You know it shouldn't be in your life, but you don't seem strong enough to remove it. It reminded me when I was thinking about this, about a text in Mark 9:29. Anyways, Jesus, in the context, He sent out his disciples to drive out demons. They come back and they say, well, there was this boy and we couldn't drive out the demon from this kid. And the father with the kid comes to Jesus, and Jesus drives out the demon. And then later on, the disciples come to Jesus and they say, why couldn't we drive out this demon? And Jesus says something very powerful in Mark 9 verse 29. This type can only come out with prayer. This type can only come out by prayer. Prayer, ladies and gentlemen, is the most powerful tool in your life to get rid of strongholds. Although the story is about driving out demons, I believe it's true in all areas of our lives. Sometimes the spiritual realm just has such a stronghold on us that the only thing that can break that is the King of Kings when we speak to him. A second point I want to share with you is this. Without a spiritual routine, weeds will overtake. Without a spiritual routine, weeds will overtake. You have to consistently tend your garden, your spiritual life. If possible, you got to go pull out weeds every day. Check your garden every day. One day, the brother whose land it is, he went into our little garden. He went in there and he found a little rabbit running around. When he told me that, I was a little bit annoyed because his fence couldn't even keep the rabbits out. So I wanted to talk to him about his fence design. The fence could keep the deer out, but not the rabbits. Luckily, he went to go check. You got to check on your garden. You got to check what's running around there, man. You got to check your spiritual life. What's running around there? Now, I haven't seen a mole yet. Perhaps because there's nothing for them to eat. They are not even interested in my garden. There are so many weeds, not even the moles are interested. Anyways, if you want a successful garden, you need to inspect it regularly and pull out weeds every day. And I think you know the spiritual direction that I'm going here. Daniel chapter 6 verse 10 indicates to us that Daniel prayed 3 times a day, and even the threat of death did not make him change his routine. Psalm 5 verse 3, Psalm 143 verse 8 seems to indicate that David decided to dedicate mornings to praise God and ask for directions. Both these men had routines built into their lives. 2 Corinthians 13:5, examine yourselves to see whether you are in the faith. You've got to put yourself through a test now and then. The early church had a routine of meeting together. Paul and Jesus had a routine in going to the synagogue. The world is built and operated by a routine. It's built into nature. The seasons come and go. If you want a healthy spiritual life, you've got to get into a routine. You've got to schedule time with God, and you've got to schedule time with God's people. Now, I'm the last person to tell you, hey man, you need to go to church. I'm the last person to say that, because I want people to go to church because they want to spend time with God's people, and it must be real, and because they want to pluck out some weeds in their garden. But you can look at people. Those who don't have a spiritual routine easier fall into a lifestyle where there's a lot of weeds in their lives. So that's a starting point. Get into the routine of getting to church, at least. And when there's life group, get to life group. Avoid the laziness. If you're lazy with the garden, it's going to end up like my garden. And that's exactly the same in your spiritual life. A garden takes time, and it takes a routine. You've got to put in the commitment first before you will taste the fruit. Sometimes we think like this. Sometimes our spiritual lives is like this. You go in the morning, you plant a tomato seed, you water it, and then you come back this afternoon and you expect to have some tomatoes. It doesn't work like that. You expect there should be no weeds growing. The weeds grow. It takes time and work before you will experience the fruit. And spiritual fruit does pay off in the long run. A third point that I have is that God grows in us while we sleep. But so does weeds. So does weeds. When we planted the garden, I trusted that God would do his magic in the soil, and he did, right? He brings seed to germination. Paul said God makes things grow, right? And I believed him. And I didn't think other things would grow so fast and so powerfully. I now know that creating a garden requires two things. Not just planting, it requires plucking. Running a garden requires planting and plucking. You've got to plant good things into your life. You've got to hear the word of God, but you also got to unpack and pull out of your life the things that are filthy. And that's the part that we neglect in our spiritual lives so often as well. Planting seeds, plucking weeds. And in this world, I think, here's an illustration. I think you get three types of gardeners. Those with green fingers. You know what green finger gardeners are? And I'm going to equate this spiritually. You decide to have a spiritual life. You want a spiritual life. And you work on it. And you eat of its fruit. And therefore you enjoy your garden. And your garden is a blessing to you. Your spiritual life is awesome. You were patient enough to wait for harvest. And now it has paid off. You will never be the same. And those of you who've really invested in your spiritual life, you know it's worth it. You know what I'm talking about. Or so you get people that's got green fingers, and then you got people that's got black thumbs. Now, black thumb, the idea of black thumbs is apparently the opposite of green fingers. I don't know that. I'm learning as well. That's a person, you decide to have a spiritual life, but you don't want to work on it. You agree, yes, I need a spiritual, but I don't want to work it, and I don't want to get into a routine. You have a garden, but it's overgrown. A lot of weeds in your life. You want the fruit, but not enough to pluck the weeds and work on it. You want the fruit to just grow in your garden without putting the work in. Ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't work like that. You got black thumbs, man. And let's say the third one is like you've got no fingers. You don't want a garden. Okay, it's like you're a paraplegic when it comes to gardening. You don't want a garden. You don't want a spiritual life. It's too much work. You want the organic fruit and vegetables. You want life to be a blessing, but you don't want to work on it. You don't want organic fruit and vegetables enough to plant a garden and to tend to it. And so you're lazy. And that's the reason why there's so many weeds in your life. And they're stunting your growth and making you an unpleasant human being. Listen to this. If you do nothing to your spiritual life, it will grow weeds. Easy. You cannot prevent yourself from being implanted with seeds from outside. I don't even know how the seeds of weeds ended up in my garden, but they are there. They're just there. Your subconscious mind is taking in information all day long through what you see on social media, through what you see on TV, what you hear in the news, what your friends say at work, the conversations that you have, and the thoughts that you have in your own mind. It's planting all kinds of repetitive thoughts, all kinds of seeds being planted in your mind, and it's creating weeds. It just happens. You cannot escape it. And the only way to deal with that is to actively pursue weeding out your garden. You want to read a cute text in your own time. It's Proverbs 24, verse 30 to 34, where the writer says that he went past the garden of a sluggard. Go see what he says over there. When you leave your garden, the wall falls in, the weeds grow everywhere. And then he talks about a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of hands, and poverty will come on you like a bandit. If you're lazy in your spiritual life, it's going to cost you all kinds of damage. Ladies and gentlemen, we are saved by grace. Don't forget that. It's not about what we have done. It's about what he had done. But we are sanctified through work. Now, God will work with us. But we have to weed our garden. We have to cleanse ourselves. My second to last point is this. Weeds love growing in good soil. Weeds love growing in good soil. The soil of our garden is amazing. When you walk in it, you sink down 30 centimeters. It is soft, it's moist, it's nutritious. You would expect that good plants grow in good soil and bad plants grow in bad soil. I'm going to have a conversation with God about that one day. Why does he allow weeds to grow in our good soil? Ladies and gentlemen, every plant, good or bad, thrives in good soil. Let me remind you of the parable of the sower. There's four types of hearts reflected there. The third type of heart, I think, is the most common. I've got some of the verses here that I want to share with you. I'll just read it to you quickly. Let me just get it here. The one type of heart is in Luke chapter 8 and verse 7. It says this, other seed fell among thorns. So the seed falls among thorns, which grew up with it and choked the plant. So the plants grew with the thorns, right? In verse 14, Jesus explains it. The seed that fell among thorns stand for those who hear the word of God. But as they go on their way, they are choked by life's worries, riches, and pleasures, and they do not mature. The point I'm trying to make here is this. That type of soil is good because the plants are growing and the weeds are growing at the same time. So it's not like the soil is bad. No, the soil is good. The point I'm trying to make is this. You can have a good heart and still have weeds in your life. You can be a good person and still have weeds in your life. Some people rely so much on having good hearts and then they don't understand why their lives are a mess. I've met so many good people with so many weeds in their lives. Having a good heart, being a good person does not guarantee a weed-free life. And in this text, let me remind you what the weeds are. Worries, riches, and pleasures. Those are weeds, ladies and gentlemen. They stunt your spiritual growth. They are preventing spiritual growth. Let me finish off with the last point. The longer you let weeds grow, the more they damage your growth. There were a couple of things that I noticed as I plucked out some of the weeds in my garden. First, the weeds were robust and healthy, but the vegetable plants were weak and small. The weeds were huge, like this eye, and my little beets were like these little miniature thingies. Weeds are thieves. They suckle the nutrients and water out of the soil. They are designed to overpower and dominate other smaller plants. This is why things like pornography is so much more powerful in a young man's life than his prayer life is. Why the love of money is always stronger than the love for God's church. Why it is so much easier to speak ill of people than to speak well of them. It's easier to do evil than good in so many areas of life. This is why we don't negotiate with evil. You don't let it grow. You pluck it out and you throw it away and you let it die. That gave me the greatest joy, to smash those weeds against the fence and let the sun bake down upon them and dry them out. And it's wonderful to go back a few days later and see them dead. It's the way we got to deal with certain things in our lives. We don't negotiate with evil. You don't let it grow. You pluck it out. You throw it away and you let it die. You pluck things like pornography, love of money, hatred, slander, unforgiveness. You pluck that stuff out of your life. A weed is aggressive. He's not your friend. He's aggressive. He'll take over your life. And the only way to deal with an aggressive weed is what? Through aggression. First thought that came to my mind. Second thought, when I pulled out the weeds, my vegetable plants came out with it. Jesus spoke about that, right? I took some images I wish I could show you, but I pulled out some of those weeds, and you see a little scrawny little beet hanging in the same lump of soil, attached to the roots of the weed. And I thought to myself, this is crazy. It immediately reminded me of the words of Jesus, where he says, "Shall we go pluck out the wheat?" And Jesus says, "No. If you pluck out the wheat now, or the weeds now, the wheat is going to come out with it." Well, I learned that very quickly, and that was quite a task to try and pull out the weeds without pulling out my veggies. The context is different, but the principle is the same. When you allow unhealthy things, addictions, attitudes to thrive in your life, it becomes a part of you, it feeds off you. And the longer you allow it to live in your life, the harder it becomes to remove it. Don't say, well, tomorrow I will stop with this addiction, or next year. Next year it's going to be harder, because it's getting more entrenched in your life. The larger a tumor grows, the more dangerous and difficult it becomes to remove it. The larger, when you pull out a weed that has been growing for a long time, it leaves a big hole in the ground. When you have addictions and lifestyles and ways of thinking that's so attached to your life and you try to remove it, if it's been there for a long time, it leaves a void in you that's very difficult to deal with. Very difficult. This is why we need to remove weeds when they are small. Before they grow big, we have to be conservative in our morality. So, let me conclude. A few thoughts from me. To plant a garden is to dream of tomorrow. That's why we plant gardens. We want to see the fruit. It's the same in our spiritual lives. And so I want to ask you this morning, what is your dream of tomorrow? What type of a person do you want to be? I don't know if you've watched the movie The Forge. We went to go watch it last night. Very good movie. If you haven't watched it and you can watch it, please go do so. And it's about men who mentor men, and this man asks this young kid, listen, I want you to go think about what type of a man you want to be. What do you want people to see when you approach them? So I want to ask you this morning, where do you want to be? What type of a spiritual person do you want to be? What type of a character do you want to carry? And then you go plant a seed, and you go tend that garden. Here's my tips. Anything that I said today is relevant. Here's my tips. Number one, pray. If there's things in your life that you dislike and you want removed, pray. Spend time in prayer. Number two, do routine maintenance. Journal your spiritual life. Check in on yourself. Number three, find a weeding partner. Find somebody that will be honest with you and say to you, hey, here's a weed in your life you need to remove. A person like that will become the best blessing to you. So ask someone to help you pull out the weeds in your own life. May God bless you. We love you. We pray for you. And I wish you all the best for the rest of the Sunday. Bye-bye.